What does it take to make workshops work? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I am on the quest to find the magic ingredient that expert facilitators use to make it easy for participants to get from confusion to clarity to action. With today's featured guests, we will take a new perspective. Kirsty Lewis is the founder of the School of Facilitation, and we met in Amsterdam to discuss what it means to be a great facilitator, and actually, more importantly, how clients can find the most suitable facilitator for their needs. So stay tuned. Oh, and by the way, did you know that if you don't have pen and paper at hand because you're commuting or running or in the gym, you can visit the podcast website, workshops.work, to download my golden nuggets for free. So visit workshops.work, check out episode 36, and download my golden nuggets. I'll see you there. Enjoy the show. Kirsty.
Miriam.
So nice to have you here.
And you. How exciting.
Yes. Welcome to Amsterdam.
Thank you.
The Workshops Work podcast.
Yes.
We are going to talk today about how clients can actually find the right facilitators, because there are so many of us and we're all doing the same, but we're still all different. So how to pick and choose.
Absolutely. And it's not just the facilitators, it's the trainers as well.
Exactly. Don't forget the trainers.
Absolutely.
And before we get there, I would love to hear from you and to share with the audience your story. So you started in sales and then you went into sales training and then you started the School of Facilitation and now you help facilitators and trainers to thrive.
Correct.
How did you get from sales to facilitation?
The story is when I left university, I got a job in the drinks industry and I started working and I was in sales there. I worked at Guinness. I then worked at Diageo, and Diageo at the time had 10,000 salespeople and they had a one way of selling. And that was my dream job, that I wanted to be part of that team who helped the salespeople globally. And and I ended up working in the sales capability team for 2.5 years. And that's where I discovered the world of workshops and coaching and creating workshops and coaching coaches and delivery and what makes a great workshop and a poor workshop. And then one day, it was the 7th of April, 2007, I had an epiphany that I wanted to become a trainer and a coach full time, which felt really strange because I always thought I'd be in the corporate world and I had a great corporate job. And so I went on a bit of a journey for 6 months and then resigned from Diageo. And even everyone at Diageo was like, you don't resign from a FTSE 100 company, like, where are you going? And it was 2007. So the gig mentality it wasn't as prevalent as it was now. And so, I went off and set up my own business and I became an associate trainer. And I was really fortunate to go and work in a training company where I was one of their biggest associates and did loads of great client work. And as many people who are listening to this might associate that, after a fashion, if you've been an associate, you'd like to do your own thing, you get more confident, you recognize what your niche is. And all the time I'd always been doodling, what makes a great workshop? How can we be even better at what we do? How do you show up in that space? And also I was starting to realize I couldn't find my gang. We call it the tribe now, I guess. Who are the other facilitators and trainers out there? So this was like 2012, 2013, and I was feeling a real disconnect. And because I couldn't find who I wanted to connect with.
So you created
I just created it myself, and that's how School of Facilitation came to be. Because it was just for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to find other, I call them like-minded souls, because like you and I, we've just sat today and we've just chatted about all things facilitation and training. And there's no need to explain where we're coming from. There's no need to give the background. You just get it. You know what it means to work with clients, you know what it means to have to sit and design something. So I wanted to create, one, a space for others to be able to come and have those conversations. Two, I really recognized the power of continuing the self-development journey as a facilitator and a trainer. And I was always shocked when I met people who were in my space but didn't have a coach, weren't doing any personal development. And so that really frustrated me. So I was like, surely you should continue growing and evolving if that's what you're encouraging and asking of your own groups.
Exactly. If we're expecting this from the groups, you need to lead by example, walk the talk. Yeah.
Oh my God, absolutely. And then there's others who absolutely live that mantra and you see them thriving and growing. And then also, because I came from a background in corporate where the leaders were the teachers, so that was a bit of a mantra, leaders as teachers, I truly believe that it's better that companies have their own trainers and facilitators, and yet companies don't always place value on those individuals and give them training on how to be a great facilitator, trainer, or coach. So that's the other thing I wanted to give back and put into the system is how can I help corporates grow their internal talent in facilitation and training?
And maybe that's a great way to enter into the topic of our discussion already. So as a corporate, what would be the topics where it makes sense to have your internal facilitators or trainers? And for which topics or under which circumstances would you go outside to look for one?
That's a great question. So I think what really benefited me, let's start there, is all my managers and leaders when I was in sales at Diageo were my teachers. So they would either come out with me to my customer meetings and coach me, or they would actually run the sales workshops. So this was the basics 101 of selling. It was how to have great customer conversations. It was how to use sales tools. It was how to, we used to call it QDV, PPPP. Anyone from Diageo listening to that will understand it. It was this sales drive. If you're a salesperson, you'll understand it. Sales drivers. So quality, distribution, visibility, price, promotion, and persuasion. And when my managers and leaders were, often they were teaching rather than training, were teaching me that, it had more value because they brought their stories, they brought their examples, they had knowledge of our customers that we would have to work with. So that really helped.
So the internal lingo as well.
Absolutely.
So you're speaking the same language.
Exactly. And having my leaders at that point bring that to life was fantastic. Where I've seen it work really well with an external trainer is when you want to create stretch and you want to create depth in a topic. And so in my world of sales, I've seen that with finance and negotiation skills. So negotiation skills, and there's some great training companies out there who deliver negotiation skills. And it just means there's a different depth of knowledge that they bring. And I think that's when you're a corporate, it's like, what can we do internally that we just know innately? But what is it we need to bring some external energy back into our system? And potentially the topic is broader, deeper, can be quite heavy at times as well.
So this relates very specifically to training.
Correct.
Would you also apply this to facilitation? So if you need another energy or maybe a sparring partner, someone who's maybe more critical or doesn't know the lingo?
Yeah, so I actually got my first taste of facilitation at Diageo because I think it was recognized by some of the sales leaders that I just loved doing it. So I worked in one part of the business, but another sales team would often ask me to go in and facilitate. They called them annual meetings between, say, Tesco and Diageo. So I would go and facilitate that meeting because I had no agenda. Whilst I had the sales background, I was nothing to do with those teams. So I could be impartial and I could hold the space. And that was really great. I think other times where it's great to have an external facilitator is where, say, the people who are commissioning the work, the conversation, it might be a leadership conversation that needs to have, or strategic or planning, and everybody needs to be involved in the room. It's really hard to facilitate and input. You can't do both.
I don't believe in facilitation and participation.
You can't. So I think that's also the benefit of then having the external facilitator to come, is where you need to be in and doing and sharing and participating.
So how can then the clients or the corporates find the facilitator that actually helps them with the topic? And how do they know whether they need a facilitator or trainer actually?
So let's start with that one. So I think if you can identify whether a piece of thinking needs to be done or ideas need to be generated, or there's a piece around innovation, or it might be strategic thinking. For me, that's facilitation. And often it's about collecting or harnessing the group think. So that would be more facilitative. And then if you're noticing there's a skill gap, there's some knowledge build, or there's behavioral change, to me, you're seeking more of a facilitative trainer. And I use that language rather than just a trainer, and definitely not a teacher. So you want someone who's going to be facilitative in their style, i.e. pull like information, because we're working with adults. So most of the time adults know it, but they just default to childlike behavior.
The knowing doing gap.
Yeah. And like you want to be pulling what they know already and then making meaning for them. So that's when I would use more of a facilitative trainer approach.
And maybe just incentivizing also to go out and seek more information, because actually all the information is out there for free. You just need someone to tell you the shortcuts and to filter what actually do you need to know and what is just a waste of time maybe.
But then you said the other question was like, so if that was facilitator or trainer, how do you know when you want to, or how do you find those people? So I've written some questions that I would be asking of myself. So what is the pain point, or what is the problem or the perceived need I have? What knowledge or experience do you want the facilitator or trainer to have? And I think that's really important, because I'd really hope you wouldn't engage with maybe a facilitative trainer to do some marketing training that only had a sales background, or someone to do some finance training that had a sales background or commercial background. And I know there are trainers out there who will say, but I can do any of it. I just need a really great facilitator guide. And I'm like, yeah, you can. But trust me, we all know when we're in front of a group of knowledge experts, if we don't have some, in English we say skin in the game, if we don't have some expertise, it's noticeable. You don't have the stories, the group notice, and there's just both of us are pulling faces right now. There's like an icky energy that goes with it, and you just feel really, for me anyway, inauthentic. So I think a corporate should be seeking, there's enough people now out there who have come from that background and have that expertise and that knowledge. I think that's really important.
For the training, I agree, because for facilitation, I think you might even be a better facilitator if you have no understanding about the content.
So I can be absolutely dreadful. I'm a chatterbox. So if I am in facilitation space, I just sometimes have to keep biting my tongue because I really want to share stories and input, and actually keeping out of the stories and the input is what is required of me, not getting all giddy. So that would be my first layer for the trainer. Is it like look for evidence of the knowledge? What industry have they come from? Ask them questions like, who have you worked for? And then who have you worked with? Like, who are some of their clients that they've had in the past? So that you can see, are they still working in a similar, they don't have to work in a similar sector. I think it's the similar function. I know some companies get hooked up, but you've got no finance experience or you've got no industry experience. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, in my instance, sales is sales, whatever you tell me. And every company goes, but we're different. You're not. And then when it comes to the facilitator, I think definitely do a bit of due diligence and interview them in terms of what methodologies do they use? How would they approach this situation? How do they see the time working and flowing? How do they unlock a group to get them thinking? How do they approach it if the group gets stuck? Don't be afraid to ask the facilitator those kinds of questions, because you need to seek evidence and get some comfort in yourself that these people know what they're doing and how they approach things. I'd also be encouraging you to be collaborative. So don't just dump everything onto the facilitator and expect them to do everything. But actually, sometimes it works even better if you can have a two-way conversation in designing the flow. So agreeing purpose and outcomes, and then just agreeing the flow of the day, how each of you are going to work together, what are the different roles that are needed, and play some scenarios out of the what if. So what if this happens, or what if we get a problem? How are we going to manage that? Because that way you can build the trust as well with the facilitator.
Yeah. I love the idea of co-designing a session with the client.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I imagine that there might be managers, team leaders who hire me as a facilitator because either they have no talent whatsoever or no time because they're just overwhelmed with their operational things. how can they then still contribute to the co-design to make sure that it's going in the right direction, although they might lack the creativity or the experience or the time?
I think in that instance, be prepared to have a conversation with the facilitator at the very beginning. So like what is like to scope out the purpose and the outcomes of the session so that, you know, the facilitator understands where you want to get to by the end of the 4 hours, the day, the 2 days. Talk with the facilitator to help them understand the number of people, the space that's going to be available. And then maybe you just say, right, I need you to go away, come back and tell me what that agenda, what the flow could look like, and then be prepared to have another call just so that the facilitator can walk it through with you. I've got a colleague though, she had the opposite whereby a client said, right, here's the agenda, this is what we're going to do. And so my colleague was like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that. But they said, we've designed it. So we were like, actually, we need to put some design time in. So corporates, if you listen to this, the reason we request design time is sometimes the following is not enough. 3 hours for visioning. So this is what the client has said, 3 hours for visioning. And so my colleague is like, okay, so what are you doing? Oh, I don't know. So when we were like, you need to put design time in for this, but we don't have budget for that. You're like, well, you can't just expect someone to think of things off the top of their head. So it's great when clients go, we've designed the agenda, but it's never enough.
Yeah.
We know that. And actually some space and time is required to bring it to life.
Do you believe that it's possible to design the agenda for someone else? So even if you had a playbook with exactly the exercises to run?
For facilitation? Yeah. I think you'd need to have a briefing though, how it would work. What are your thoughts?
I was wondering because I think you definitely do need the briefing. And I think the person you're designing for needs some experience in facilitation in order to bring their own style in.
Absolutely.
Because I used to write speeches for my boss in my previous life and job. And I realized that I hated it to sit there when he was delivering the speeches because I had exactly in mind what he would say and how he would say it. And then I was sitting there, no, you cannot say that. Why are you skipping this part?
Yeah.
I was so proud of this kind of phrasing. And then he skipped it. And I can imagine with facilitation, it's similar, that we have something very specific in mind when we design it. And then the person reading it
doesn't do it. But is that not back to this whole thing as well with both facilitation and training, is when you design the purpose and the outcomes, my mantra is hold it lightly. So don't strangle the outcomes. Don't hold them in the palm of your hand so tightly that you don't give them space to breathe. And that sometimes what shows up in the room, when you then get the energy of the participants and the space and you, other things start to show up. And I think that's where you have to give it a bit of wiggle room and freedom to move around.
And that's very interesting, I think, from the client side, because you need a lot of trust in the facilitator that he or she would understand when is the time to actually be more flexible and when you cannot strangle the outcomes out of a group. So how would you approach this? How do you find the balance?
So that bit is about the trust, isn't it? So I think if a client's working with a new facilitator, that's why you need some time with them on these conversations, whether to meet in person, on Zoom, on Skype, on the telephone, for you to start to get to know that person, engage with them, hear their ideas, talk about their style, because all of us have a different style and stance and an energy that we bring.
Luckily.
Thankfully. And I think that's another thing you want to be seeking as a client is, what do I think is the type of energy and stance we need in the room? Because you could engage with one facilitator and get one style, and you could engage with another facilitator and get another style. So I think you should ask that question as well. What is your stance? What is your style? What's your energy?
So what are the different kinds of energy and stance?
Well, let's always start with ourselves. So I think you and I would be quite different. So I am super energetic and I'm a bit like Tigger. So I can bounce into a room, even on a Monday morning yesterday. Someone was like, oh my God, your energy. It's like, so that's what I bring. I'm just shy of 6 foot. So I bring presence, I bring impact. My room is always very colourful. There's always lots of posters on the wall with heart-filled information. So I create curiosity that way. So I have that style. I think there's other people I've met and they have this beautiful, calm, serene, knowing presence, even their energy, whilst if it was on a scale with mine, is lower, but they've got this real groundedness. Like, I probably admire those people because they're the opposite of me. I'm like, well, how do you do that? That is so cool. I think you have sometimes those who've got a lot of knowledge as well. And sometimes it's useful to have that knowledge, and that's evidential.
You have the techies.
I worked with a sports psychologist last week. That was really evidential. He had all this knowledge, but it's how you use it and how you bring it to life. What other styles do you think there are?
I was thinking about the techies of using technology.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I am a pen and paper person.
Yeah.
I don't have a PowerPoint. I don't believe in PowerPoints and any kind of distraction by screens in my workshops. And I can see other facilitators who enjoy using tech.
Definitely. So I rarely have tables in the room as well. So it's often just chairs. I think though, if it's more of a training and the group need to be writing, we do have some tables, but because I'm more about training trainers to train, I often look to create different experiences for those people, especially in corporates, because they're so used to coming into those spaces where it's always a U-shaped table or circle tables. Like, I sometimes take the tables out so they go, oh, what's happened here? This feels different. I want them to feel the difference.
Yeah. And this might actually be interesting for a client just to ask the question, what is yours, just to describe. So you enter the room and then what? How does a room look like?
Yeah.
Because I recently interviewed Sean, who's using billboard design thinking. So he has one huge poster on the wall and then he just walks his way through the poster. And Oscar, for instance, who is totally flexible and says, okay, if he feels the room needs something else, he would totally shift.
Oh, God, that I am a furniture removal lady. I am the irritation of most hotels if I'm in there and I walk in and I just go, no, I need a helping hand, and I'm moving tables all the time. And because I just think they just block the energy in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you want to create, I just find if you create the space, oh my God, and then we haven't even talked about, there are now, especially in coaching and more in training, facilitation, people working just in nature all the time and getting outside and working in the outdoors and creating spaces outside.
I talked to Megan about having workshops in the woods.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool as well. And I think not being afraid to do something different and suggesting that to the clients.
And I think, and this was also what we talked about, and I would be interested in your opinion, different topics ask for different styles of facilitations and also different environments. So, for instance, if you have an innovation workshop, you might have a different setting and you need a different facilitation style than if you're in a strategy session.
Absolutely. And that's okay. And so another couple of other questions I personally would be asking the client to help me understand their needs is like, how many people are going to be with us on the day? What's your budget? And what are your timelines? And the reason for that is sometimes clients come to you and they've got big ideas and plans, but then they don't have a budget. And actually their timeline is suddenly improbable because they're like, oh, actually, we need you to do this in 2 weeks' time. It's like, if you want a really good trainer or facilitator, they are not going to be available in 6 weeks' time, let alone 2 weeks' time. So I really call that out with clients is please do some forward thinking because there's nothing worse when a client comes to you and says, we really want to work with you. Oh, can you do it in the next month? And you're like, no. So your good quality facilitators and trainers and coaches, guess what? They're in demand. They're booked out.
Yeah.
And do you know what? The further in advance you can book them, the better.
And also, at least I can only speak about myself, but I also need thinking time and preparation time. So I want to get a feeling what the group actually needs. I want to have a talk to the participants. If it's not a huge group, but if it's in the sweet spot below 10 or 12, I want to have a talk with every single participant to understand what's coming up, to have an off the record kind of talk of, okay, tell me about the elephants.
Absolutely. So there's that bit. And then the budget as well is just a case of, I think intuitively people know it's better to be offsite than on-site. So meaning in your offices, unless you seem to have an amazing dedicated space that is for a big open space. So there's some companies I work with and they just have amazing meeting rooms. So we have big space, big rooms, lots of daylight. And I think we all know as well, if we do run events in an office, people do have the temptation to go back to their desks at breaks, and then they get distracted. So what is it you're trying to create? Like, really think into that. What is it we want to create? What's the energy? What's the vibe? Because there is some really good, I speak from the UK, but I guess it's all around Europe. There's some really good spaces now that are available and they're not breaking the bank. So let's get creative, because there is possibility for great, and the environment is so important to, I think, great facilitation and great training. It really does make a big difference.
Yeah, if we want the group to think out of the box, don't lock them into the same old box.
Yeah, a really good friend of mine, Laura Beckingham, talks about beige meetings, beige, brown boxes. And I'm like, oh God, I'm so with you. It's like, it's so easy for meetings to be boring and dull. And if anyone's read Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, she talks to this, and it's like, every time you have a meeting, you've got an opportunity to inspire, to cultivate, to grow your teams. Or is it just going to be a quarterly team meeting with the same agenda? And it's so boring.
That's voice.
But the point is, like, when it becomes, if a meeting always becomes the same, you're preconditioning your team's behavior. And guess what? No, you're not going to get the best out of them, because they're all bored and they're all coming. So that's where the brown beige box starts to show up. It's like, create something that's inspiring and exciting.
So let's surf this wave a little bit further. What makes a workshop fail? So tell me more about these beige
where do I go, Miriam? I've got so many thoughts on this one. Firstly, I think a workshop fails if the facilitator and trainer is still talking after 10 minutes of everyone arriving. So people should be up on their feet, connecting, getting to know one another, even if they are an in-house team that work with each other every single day.
Can I quickly, one side question?
Yeah.
So would it then be a strategy for a client who's looking for a facilitator to also observe the conversation with the potential facilitator and how much speaking time they're actually taking and how many questions they're asking?
That's a good point. Yeah, how many questions does that trainer facilitator ask of you, or do they just talk
to really understand?
I don't know if there's a correlation, but there might be some evidence, some thinking.
Okay.
So that would be one. If you're not on your feet within 10 minutes, I have sat in a session when I went to co-facilitate and help someone out, and they spoke for an hour and a half before anyone did anything. I was just like weeping inside. Another epic fail, no daylight. We are not moles, the little black animal that lives under the earth. Like, we need daylight to inspire us. And another fail would be the facilitator or the trainer not enabling and helping the group make meaning of something they've just experienced. So what I mean by that is, many of us will run experiences or exercises to help people learn something, or to take and gather knowledge together or information. But if you do not then label what's just happened, invite the group to reflect on what it is they've just learned, write down what they've just learned, share back in the room what they've just learned. And even if it's in training practice, like, label 3 things that they should always remember from that experience. You're not making meaning. And so I've gone through experiences as a participant where I've been invited to do an exercise, which I absolutely loved on many occasions. And then it was just like, right, and then on to the next thing. And I'm like, oh, hold on. What does that mean to me?
Yeah.
And it really then brought it home to me that when I am either training or facilitating, that is an important part of the learning journey, or any journey, is making that time to give people that space for reflection and thinking through.
And I think it's important on so many different levels, because first of all, if we invite someone to reflect, obviously we want to pay them respect to also share it.
Yes.
So if I ask you a question, I want to hear your answer.
Oh my God, can I just share something? Please. Last week, I was working with someone and he was asking the group questions and then didn't give them enough time to answer, so he'd answer it for them.
No.
I was like,
that's painful.
It was really painful. Yeah. Anyway, so those things like that, don't do that, please.
Yeah.
That would be another epic fail in Kirsty's book.
Because also, if you're doing these exercises and you invite the group for reflection, many of us, and I think the 2 of us are part of this group, we just think through speaking. So through the reflection, through sharing, we're actually digest the exercise and we get the essence out of it.
Absolutely. And the other thing I've learned and noticed is by inviting people to put into the room out loud what it is they've learned, other people then hear what's been said and go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that one. And, you know, you hear other ideas and like share.
That's why I love to brainstorm out loud. So I love these moments where I just put the timer of 3 minutes or whatsoever and say, okay, let's brainstorm questions, failures, whatsoever, ideas. And everyone just speaks out whatever crossed their mind and writes it on a Post-it. Because then there might be many bad ideas coming out, but they will inspire others to come up with better ones and to build on each other. I love the dynamic that comes from that.
So those are 3-4 things about what would make a workshop fail. 1, you're still sat on your bottom after 10 minutes, no daylight, and not making meaning and time for reflection.
And I think one thing that we agreed upon and we shared before we pushed the record button is the purpose.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Right? So another thing, I've got so many. Maybe we should write a book on this. A lack of purpose or clarity of outcome.
Yeah.
How the beep can you even create a workshop or an event if you do not know why you are there?
Yeah.
Just because the client gives you the topics that they want to cover, you still need to get really clear on the why. Yeah. And there's enough evidence now that of books and articles and videos, like why the why is so important. And also, what is it the learners need by the end or the group need by the end, the business. So it's like the I, the we, the it.
Before we continue the show, let me take a brief moment to thank our sponsor, Session Lab. Are you using Excel or Word to prepare and schedule your workshops? Try something that is designed for facilitators. With an easy-to-use drag-and-drop agenda builder, Session Lab allows you to be free and creative in your workshop process design. Session Lab also comes with an immense built-in library of workshop activities and facilitation techniques to help you to find new inspiration for your sessions. Stop messing with spreadsheets and focus on designing engaging workshops. Try it as sessionlab.com. I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't believe in its value myself. To what extent do you think is the facilitator responsible for the outcomes?
Good question. I think the facilitator, it's almost like they're babysitting them in that session. So they could be the outcomes that the client has scoped out, but I think then they're handed over to the facilitator to bring to life and to nurture and to hold lightly. And therefore, I think there is a responsibility that they guide the group to enable them to have the exploration of those outcomes. Yeah, because I think if the facilitator or the trainer doesn't hold them, who does?
Yeah. I was just thinking, because on the one hand, and this comes back to the trust when you hire a facilitator, I think it might make sense to define the expected outcomes, but maybe even the minimum outcomes. But then as a facilitator, if I realize at one point that the group is not ready because everyone arrived with maybe different expectations, or there is a topic coming up that is actually more important, and that without solving the people issues in the room, we will never achieve agreeing on a strategy, then I simply cannot achieve the goals that we defined beforehand.
So one of the other, I guess, another epic fail in a workshop for me would be that the group are not given time to articulate their personal objective or outcome for the day. So again, I've seen it work really well when people are given, I call it settling time. So there's like a couple of exercises you do, but one of them would be the outcomes. Like, what is it the group want to achieve? Like, what's the individual personal objective for the day? And then they share that out loud with the group. And by having people do that and spending time on it, and sometimes it feels like a disproportionate amount of time, but it gives me evidence, gives me information as to what's important to this group, what are their expectations. I've had people come to sales training and they thought they're going to negotiation skills training or presentation skills, but it gives me that information that I can course correct quite quickly and manage their expectations. But also I get information back, so I know where to go. And if you don't do that, you get tripped up along the way. So I think that's another thing that's important.
And I think at least for training, maybe not so much, but at least for a workshop on a specific topic with a very specific group, you can even do this beforehand.
Absolutely. And then I think for facilitation, there's absolutely, it doesn't even matter how big, but just having some form of exercise that allows you to allow the group to check in, like, what am I doing here? Like, what are my expectations? Like, what do I want to get from our time together? I think that's important.
Yeah. What is your favorite exercise?
I love a walk the wall, as I call it. So I love using walls, and there's always posters and flip charts on my walls. And so to me, and if any of my friends are listening to this who know me, a walk the wall exercise is probably use it more in training. And it's often when there's a process a process that needs to be followed. And I know I'm talking about sales training, but often we talk about a 6-step sales process, 5 steps to a great sales conversation. And I love putting these processes up on the wall, but they're blank. And then you invite the group to populate what they think happens at each stage. And then you share back, and then you talk to why the group thought that should happen at each step. And then you move things around, like the skills, the behaviors, the ways of working. And the reason I really like it is A, everyone's on their feet. B, people are participating. They're sharing their thinking. It's not me explaining a process to them, because guess what? I can sit there and explain it, and adults are clever enough that they all sit there and nod and go, yes, I agree, Kirsty. But they're not engaged. It's like they're not making their own meaning.
And then they forget.
Well, yeah. Or they're just a bit like, yeah, I know that. But actually, when you invite them to populate it and create it for themselves, you could do that with any process. So it could be a financial one, a marketing one, a sales one, supply chain, anything. I really invite that. Or it might be, even if you're doing some ideation or innovation, like getting people up and standing and looking at the wall with some posters. There might be half populated words, or so there might be templates, but get people standing and working on a wall and writing.
Would you give them post-its so that you can move their ideas around?
I do that. Yeah, I love it. And I know there's different schools of thought coming out now because we're being way more sustainable, but do love a post-it.
Yeah. And I think I was just asking because it's a totally different flow. I think if you ask people to write directly on a poster and then it's there. And you cannot move it around. It's just there. Whereas a post-it, you can take it away. You can maybe reframe it. You can cluster it, put it on.
And my work attire now are jeans and trainers and a shirt. And in my back pocket is always like marker pens from Newland, which I just absolutely adore their pens, and post-it notes. So I'm literally always whipping out post-it notes and marker pens and writing. So yeah, that's my go-to.
Awesome. Yeah, for me it's the same.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Friends make fun of me. Did you bring your post-it notes?
I have got the big ones. I left them behind though.
Yeah. We are talking about how clients can make sure that they're finding the right facilitators. Yes. And I would love also to turn this around, unless you have something to add. Otherwise, I would ask, how can actually facilitators make sure that they will find the right clients for them?
Yes. So I think for facilitators and trainers, it's absolutely fine to niche and go micro on what it is you offer. So don't be afraid to say, I am a facilitator who plays with open technology or open space. You know, it's okay to make a stand. And the same with training. Don't be afraid to say my expertise areas are, well, for me, it'd be sales training, sales coaching, you know, and I will always say that. Because it makes it easier for you to know what you're telling people that you do. It's easier for the client to find you and to connect. I think you can then become really expert in that area and you can go quite deep. Personally, I have this real thing when I look at profiles of people and I see a list of like 10 plus areas of expertise, it just makes me shiver. I'm just like, how is that absolutely possible that that's your thing? I fundamentally disagree. I will quite happily talk to those people as well if they want to find me after this, but I think there's absolutely no harm in being an expert in one area or one kind of facilitation style. So there's some great people in the world of systemic constellation. We get Lego Serious Play now, Time to Think, the Nancy Klein work. It's okay to specialize.
it sounds to me as if it's a specialization in very specific methods.
Potentially, yeah. And I think it's also okay. So I would say I've got a couple of methods, maybe 3 methods that I use, and I just interweave them, but I don't necessarily label them. So I'm NLP trained, I'm a master NLP practitioner, but that falls in and out of vogue. So I don't really label it. I just
Which is a shame,
actually.
actually.
I know, I quite like it. Systemic constellations, which I just love, making the invisible visible and playing with energy and intuition. And then I had a great teacher called Tim Andrews, and I've sort of named his work Stretch Learning. So I use all his principles, but you end up, that's my style, that's my energy. And that's what I'm probably getting more known for. And there'll be other people who use other tech, low tech, high tech, no tech, whatever it might be, conversation methodologies. And that's okay. One thing as well we haven't covered, which we should probably go back to, is but how do the corporates then find the right facilitator or trainer for them? And I was thinking about this. So first thing I do is like, who do I know? And I'd go out to them and say, are they the right person for the job that you're looking for? If they're not the right person, in theory, if they've got good integrity, they tell you that, and they then go to their network. And I would ask people that you know to recommend out. And the world of facilitation and training, I think, is such that we are all getting to know each other way better. And therefore, I think you can tell someone who is good at what they do is they'll recommend quality, they'll recommend someone else into your business. And so I work that way massively. So sometimes my clients are like, do you know someone who does X, Y, or Z? And I'm like, yes, let me introduce you.
Yeah.
But I'll only introduce people that I've worked with or that I know are good.
Or that you trained.
Or that I've trained myself. Well, otherwise, I don't want to recommend someone in who's poor, because it will, at a micro level, reflect back on me, because I want to share great knowledge or great trainers or great facilitators back.
Even beyond micro level, I think. Yeah. And that's interesting. I'm really curious now.
Go on.
So, for instance, we never saw each other facilitate.
No, not yet.
So very rarely you meet fellow facilitators and you actually have first-hand information about their facilitation skills. So how can you actually evaluate or get an idea of the facilitation skills of...
As a corporate, or as another facilitator trainer?
As another facilitator.
I think you know the questions to ask. Like a classic one, describe how you'd run that session. And if someone says to me immediately they're opening up their PowerPoint, I'd be like, oh, God, kill me now.
Try PowerPoint.
Yeah, because I just don't use it. And there's nothing wrong with it. I get that for all of you who are bristling. I think you just know, I'd be like, what training do you do for yourself? How often do you have a coach? Do you have supervision? What groups are you part of? Who are you connected to? What other trainers and facilitators? Because I think that's really important. So corporates, if you're listening to this, you want to be hiring someone who's doing their own work. Because if you're, and what I mean by your own work is their inner work. So do they have a supervisor? Do they have a coach? What was the last course they went on for themselves? Because if you find that someone you're working with is not doing that work, they're not growing themselves, then quite frankly, they're going to get stale. So I think you have absolute permission as a client to be asking those kinds of questions. And if someone doesn't want to answer it and they want to tell you that they are God's gift because they have trained 100,000 people, which I've had someone tell me, and why do I need to talk to you even? I'm like, fine, I don't really want to work with you.
I totally agree, because to me, one of the most important skills of a facilitator is actually confidence, presence, listening. And you cannot get to this degree of maturity without doing the inner work.
Absolutely.
And I like that you're pointing out also the connection, because you want to also learn, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We are so many facilitators all over the world.
Yeah.
We're all kind of doing the same things, and we're all doing them just slightly differently.
Yeah.
And just through the exchange, we can just learn from each other and we become so much better.
Absolutely.
Since I started this podcast, I learned so much. I mean, it's like my own certification.
Well, it probably is, because you're sitting and talking and connecting, and you can't not unlearn what you've just heard. Yeah. It's like you can't unsee what you might have just seen. So, of course, you're going to learn. And I think for our clients, I've never once been asked, what learning do you do? Or what coach do you do, or what have you done? And I'd be absolutely fine if a client said that to me, because I think it would show an element of integrity from them.
And it shows that the facilitator trainer is actually walking the talk.
Yeah. Oh my
again.
God. Can you imagine? Like, I'd just be so irritated if I went and had on a workshop for myself and then discovered that trainer or that facilitator or the coach wasn't doing their own work. I just think it's a bit hypocritical, because we are in the space of learning, development, growth,
totally
expansion.
And it's so difficult also to develop this empathy for our groups if we don't know how it feels to be in such a workshop exercise. Or
yeah, that's true. And take ourselves back to that space of learner.
And then I think it's, from what you said, is so you would ask a facilitator on how they design a session. And I think and you referred to PowerPoint, for instance. And I guess there are grand facilitators out there who still do use, or who use PowerPoints in their workshops. So what is the difference between just having a different style of facilitation and just being a poor facilitator? Because let's be honest, they are out there because workshops have a bad reputation for a very specific reason, and it's usually poor facilitation.
Yeah, we're both pulling funny faces right now. So what's the question?
How can we distinguish, how can we make sure that we are judging a facilitator not by their style, but by their skills?
That's a really great question. Even if you have a certification, does that make you a good facilitator? Not necessarily, because it just means you can pass a test.
You can pass the driving license, a theoretical driving license, fantastically, and still be a very poor driver.
Exactly. Oh, man, what a question. How can you sense that? I mean, God, if you had a really big piece of work coming up, you'd probably ask, could you go and watch someone do some delivery? I think that would be absolutely fair, especially if it's a big piece. I think you would, if you're a client and there's something coming up, you might even ask to speak to other clients of this particular facilitator for a conversation. I think the client needs to tune in to what is being said. But it's like, God, it's really stumped me. I can't think of the answer.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would maybe come back to something that you said earlier, is to listen to what kind of questions the facilitator asks to really understand the need of the client and to what extent this facilitator person can listen. Yeah. Because I think these basic skills go beyond the style even.
Yeah. And I also trust your instinct. So gut feeling, if your inner voice is telling you something, listen to whatever that something is. And if it's in English, we'd say a niggle. If there's like a question mark in your head or there's a concern, explore that, like ask some questions around it yourself. And the opposite, if there's something going and it's like a big buzzer, a big ping, 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 all really good and really positive, is explore that. Like, what are you noticing? Don't be afraid to do that.
I like this because it's also a lot about just chemistry. If we hire or if we work with a client or a facilitator and there's a good chemistry, then by definition, the energy will be high in the room. Then the co-design of the session will be easier, will be more fun. Yeah. And usually then it will work out anyway.
Yeah. I feel like we need to write a bit of a how to find the right facilitator trainer for you.
Yes,
PDF.
Let's do that. Let's do that. That's a nice project.
We could do that.
Yay.
Wait for that one, peeps. That'll come out soon. Give Miriam and I a couple of months.
Yay. We love projects. We are almost coming to an end. Is there anything you would like to share that we haven't touched upon yet?
No, I think I'd recap. So from a client perspective, don't be afraid to do your due diligence and ask questions and seek evidence or understanding of the person you want. Don't be afraid to ask your network for help, like to find the right facilitator and trainer. And not everybody is right for the job. Yeah. And I think a good facilitator or trainer will tell you that they are not right, but will recommend someone in for you. I think that's one thing. For other facilitators and trainers listening to this, keep doing your work, keep doing your inner work as much as your outer work, because the more you, sorry to be blunt, sort your shit out on the inside, the easier life becomes on the outside. I think there's something I saw recently about, it's not about building layers onto yourself anymore. It's about peeling back and like take yourself back. Because often we've picked up all these layers from the beliefs and values of others and lifetime of being told what to do. And actually now a lot of us are exploring and going back the other way. So who are you really? And going back. So do your inner work. If that's one thing I'd say as a gang, you can do that.
Yeah, and I think to really read a room and to feel the needs of a group, you don't want to be triggered by a certain personality or a certain situation.
Absolutely.
You don't want to take a certain reaction personally. So you really have to work on your ego as a facilitator.
Oh, my life. And a really good friend of mine, Sarah, says some of us have dancing eyebrows. And imagine if you're triggered and I've got dancing eyebrows, my eyes can go, I mean, you read me like a book. I'm really quite comfortable with that now. But literally, I can just look at you and go, what the fuck? Like, and my eyes will go wide, the eyebrows go up.
Relate.
But it's so true. And if we don't do our inner work, it all shows up. And another great teacher of mine said to me once, she goes, before you come into this world of training and facilitating, you need to start sorting out your own limiting beliefs. Otherwise, it just shows up. It leaks all the time through your language, your stance, your style, your reactions. So even so we're going off topic again, but if you're in a workshop and something triggers you, just write it on a Post-it note so you can explore it afterwards. Just notice what was the trigger, because that's the bit you've got to explore.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what I'm thinking.
That's a good point. Thank you for sharing. One last question before we wrap it up from the client perspective again. How much time would you advise them to take for the preparation and also for the follow-up?
Of a workshop, of an event?
Of a workshop.
Wow. I think it depends what is it the workshop is going to be doing. So if it's like a 2-day event, do not be surprised if the recommendation is 2 days of design, because that would include phone calls, that would include thinking time, that could include research, that could include talking to some of the participants if it's the right thing to do. I think you need a minimum, 2 days, depending on what it is. So please do not be surprised that there is that time requested, because 1 or 2 phone calls for 1 hour will not be enough to get something created for you. That is of a standard that it can be delivered. Because sometimes, even if you're working with a facilitator or trainer who knows your business really well, it does pay to spend some time talking about what is going to happen, how it's going to happen, like what your expectations are. And I think that's sometimes part of the process that clients want to squeeze, because I don't know, maybe we need to do some research, but do they see it as dead time? They don't see the value. And for the wrap up time afterwards as well. So what exactly do you want the facilitator or trainer to come back with? What do you want to know? What do you want to hear, see? What are you expecting? Because that could be an hour conversation, which is fine. Or there might be some big outputs that need writing up, who's taking ownership. But if that's the facilitator, that's more time. So we factor that in, don't we?
Yeah. Very last question. I cannot let you go. It's just, how about co-facilitation?
Oh my God.
This would maybe be an entire episode as such, but maybe just one thought, because there might be just a solution in between. Instead of choosing between an internal facilitator and hiring an external, you could just hire an external to co-facilitate the session with an internal facilitator. Do you have experience on that? And what are the pros and cons, just in a nutshell?
Challenge. So co-facilitating, whether it's an internal or 2 externals, you need to set aside time to have a conversation about what is it we're going to do, how we're going to do it, who's going to do what, how are we going to communicate with one another. So you need time. And if you ever forget to do that, you will notice it, because it just becomes, however good you are and agile you are on your own, you notice that you bump up against another person. And especially if you've never worked together. So some people I work with, and my God, it's like we just read each other's minds now, because we've worked together for 8 years and it's just seamless. It's beautiful. And then there's other people I've worked with just once, and it's like, oh my God, that's really sticky, or our styles are quite different and it's noticeable. So I think, you need time, and especially with an internal, I think just how you connect with that person, what is their skill level and capability level, what do they want you to carry? What do they want you to pick up and focus on? Because actually the likelihood is you're going to have maybe more skill than them. Now, sometimes though, you get blown away of the capability of the individual you work with on an internal level. But more often than not, you will have the more knowledge.
Because you're specialized.
Because that's what you do. That's your job.
Yeah, it's your job.
Yeah. But I'd say if anyone's going to co-facilitate, give some time to have a conversation.
And maybe then to be transparent also on how to divide the session and the work.
Yeah, and who's going to do what, and what if the person who's not leading the session wants to add something? How are they going to sort of make themselves known? Is it a hand up? Is it a touch on the nose, a rub of the ear? Like, how are you going to do it?
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
If someone fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up, doesn't have time to listen to the entire show again. Yeah. What would be the one thing that you would like them to know about our conversation?
Oh my
God. Or
God.
Beyond. Maybe just in general.
If you fell asleep, you missed Miriam and I talking about how clients can find really great facilitators and trainers. You missed us talking about the facilitator and trainer doing their own inner work, how to co-facilitate. We talked about what makes workshops fail, the importance of purpose and outcomes in any event. I think those are the key things.
Great. And if now they want to reach out to you, hire you, work with you, get trained by you, laugh with you, how can they find you?
Come and find us on the website. So www.schooloffacilitation.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I love being on Instagram and meeting people there. So School of Facilitation again, and then LinkedIn, obviously. But that's under Kirsty Lewis.
Great. I will put everything in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.